What was the reasons for coming up with the Sedona tube acoustic preamp? We wanted to solve problems and challenges that acoustic instrument users face when they're in a recording, a live, or broadcast environment. For example, acoustic guitars, which are resonant, wonderful sounding guitars, with their piezo pickups, because it's a piezo technology, it makes the guitar sound very harsh. So by mellowing it out, going through tube circuitry, as well as providing the right EQ and effects loops and all kinds of in and outs, this is the tool to make the sound great. When you run through tubes in a proper Class A circuitry, you're actually enhancing the even harmonics of the tone, and it creates the silky effect to the signal that's coming into it. Tubes really do have an impact on the tone. Just gotta ask anybody in esoteric or high-end hi-fi of the difference between, say, that and running through digital circuitry, or even op-amp circuitry where it's exclusively operational amplifiers. So it's almost like wetting the tone of the instrument. And that's how I would describe the feeling. And it's more texture, it's sonic texture. It's kind of like the difference between polyester and cotton. Which one would you like against your body? Well, it's the same thing in terms of aural tone. We have a 3-band EQ, including a notch switch, which allows you to change the mid-range frequencies, which is very important, as some instruments are very bass heavy, and you want to be able to notch out some of the bass. And then other instruments are very thin sounding, where you actually need to warm them up by changing the mid-range frequency. So for example, 550 hertz and 250 hertz. 250 hertz would be used for a very bass heavy instrument where you need more clarity of the mid-range. And the 550 would be utilized if you had an instrument that was very thin sounding, which is entirely possible. Now we also have a bright switch, because as you know, some of the instruments sound a bit dull if they use certain kinds of pickups on the high end of the strings, and you may want to bring up the high end a bit. So for example, we also provide an active effects loop, which was a feature that I pioneered many, many years ago, over 32 years ago, which allows you to match either line level or instrument level or anywhere in between for the most optimum signal to noise ratio of your effects chain. Having an effects loop is a terrific way to improve your signal to noise ratio. It is also a great way to utilize delay effects such as choruses, flangers, phases, echoes, all that reverbs, because what you're doing is then reproducing cleanly through those different effects that which you have got your guitar EQ'd and levels and so on, which sounds far better than actually running it on the input of the unit, because you're not amplifying the noise of the effects devices. So you've got a super clean return. And by having an effects loop, that also means that you're minimizing how you interface with the outside world, because you're taking the outputs from the main output, and all the bypass and buffering and everything else for the effects loop is taken care of internally. We also have a anti-feedback equalizer, which is it dips, it's a cut, and it's a parametric but in a minus zone only, that allows you to tune out those resonating, droning strings, which occur quite frequently in a live environment. So for instance, if let's say you had an acoustic upright bass, you might find that if it was being amplified in a large volume, that resonant warmth of the bass actually works against you, and you have to tune out some of that resonance. And the same thing, of course, with acoustic guitars. You'll have droning kind of sounds and howling at certain frequencies, depending on your orientation to the speakers or the acoustic environment of the room that you're playing with. So this allows you to compensate for that. Now we have master outputs. We have 2 different outputs. We have an output for the direct and an output for the master that's post EQ. So we give you level controls for each. So in the back here, we actually have used discrete male and female jacks, XLRs, rather than a combo jack for the highest reliability. And so we have balanced line input as well as unbalanced input. We have a pad here so that you're able to utilize a line level signal coming in without distorting the preamp. For example, supposing you went through some kind of active electronics on the instrument itself, or there was a mic preamp in series, or there could be just a whole host of situations where you're coming in with a very hot signal rather than instrument level. So we have a 20 dB pad. We also have phantom power. So for example, if you were to use a condenser microphone that could take advantage of phantom power, meaning it wouldn't need a battery or anything else, we provide the 48 volt phantom here for it. We have a separate tuner output, so it allows you to keep a tuner in the chain without affecting the tone. Many tuners, if you run a signal through them, actually attenuate some of the level. They have impedance mismatches. I've seen all kinds of stuff with tuners. So this allows you to actually have a separate buffered tuner output. So here's the direct out, which is just like having a direct box, and you have your level control there for that output. You have your send and return for your effects loops, and you have your main output. So for example, you could, when you run to the board, let's say you're in a live environment, you could actually feed the sound man two signals. You can feed him a direct sound, which is the instrument buffered through tubes, and you could feed him a signal from the main output, which is post EQ and post effects loop. So that allows you to have two completely different mixes, and each one has ground lifts on it, and that's where we offer the two balance line outputs here. So it has a power switch, it has a fan for cooling, it has an AC fuse, and of course it has a universal power input, so you can utilize power cords from any of the different countries. For instance, in a house of worship, the TAP-1 is a perfect item for house of worship performance. One of the things you want to do is you want to come into the PA system with a conditioned signal that already has its EQ. It makes it much easier for the house PA to be able to carry your tone successfully. In fact, the engineers can just set the console on flat on the EQ and the different channels, and then that you give yourself control on this locally. For example, in small clubs, you have a problem in a small club that you may not have a really great PA system. So using your instrument through this, you can consistently get the right sound wherever you travel. It's very common just to take a gig bag, a few pedals in a bag, and this, and be able to travel around from venue to venue and have a predictable sound each venue. Otherwise, you're at the complete mercy of whatever PA system that you're running through.